This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome everyone to today's Silversoft and Deltek sponsored webinar, where we'll be looking at Deltek's knowledge management solution called Deltek PIM. Just a couple of introductions before we get started. I'm Yvonne Bear and I'll be your moderator for this event today. So if you are experiencing any audio issues or would like to include some questions into the GoToWebinar panel on the right-hand side of your screen, please do so throughout the webinar. On the call with us, we also have Ian Ravenhill. He's the Head of Enterprise Sales here at Silversoft, based in our Johannesburg, South Africa office. And the real star of the show, we've got Robert Price from Deltek, who's joined us all the way from the UK, and he'll be taking us through a product demonstration a little bit later on. Also, just a reminder that we will be taking questions right at the end of the webinar, but feel free to slot them into the panel as we go. Also, I will be emailing a recording of the session to everyone that has registered within the next 2 days. But please feel free to get in touch with either Ian or myself via email. You'll see our email addresses are listed in the page. With that, I'm going to hand over to Ian.
Perfect. Thank you, Yvonne, for the introduction. Good day, everyone. My name is Ian Ravenhill, and thank you for the time taken to join us today. Just in terms of our agenda, so we're going to be sort of just providing you with some background as to who Deltek and Silversoft are, and then we're going to move into our subject matter for today, which is discussing knowledge management and then getting into how Deltek provides the applicable solutions to manage that appropriately. And that demonstration will be handled by Robert. So in terms of background, Deltek is the single largest provider of solution and softwares to the professional services industry globally, with the architecture and engineering sector being one of their biggest focus areas. As you'll see here in the slide, they've got currently 7,000 named customers within the architecture and engineering space. And obviously why this has made them a leader is that they've spent 30 years building their software, which is industry focused for your particular industry. Also, over the last couple of years, Deltek has made incredible investments within the cloud infrastructure, and today's software that you'll see has also recently been migrated to the cloud. In terms of Silversoft, so we are the current partner in South Africa, Africa, and other territories for Deltek, and we've been a partner of theirs for the last 15 years. And part of our success as to why we've been so successful in delivering the Deltek solutions is that we closely align our focus and strategy with that of Deltek. So one of the core focus areas in South Africa is the architecture and engineering sector, where we've been implementing the Deltek range of solutions for going on 8 years now. So in terms of our local presence, you'll see that we've got some strong clients in South Africa that we've been involved with, and some of them we've been working with for coming on for nearly a decade now. So that's just to provide you with an overview in terms of who Silversoft is and who Deltek is in regards to today's presentation. In terms of moving forward, so what is knowledge management? So in industries like yours, knowledge management is the IP that's created regarding your projects pertaining to emails, documents, and drawings. And if you look at the advent of technology and what it's allowed us today, is that interesting stat is that 90% of the data in the world has been created over the last 2 years. So if you think about some of the challenges in terms of managing this data and the knowledge within your organization, and I'm sure some of you who are watching this will understand, is that you can have documents and information residing in multiple locations with multiple versions of the truth which may often make sharing the information amongst your project teams difficult because no one knows which is the correct document or version to be working on. So what does this end up leading to? Well, you've got frustrated project teams, unhappy clients, missed deadlines, wasted time and effort due to the time taken to find the correct information or document. And ultimately, this puts your firm at quite a lot of risk in terms of managing it. So how does Deltek overcome this? So Deltek has a solution known as Deltek PIM, which is a central repository for managing all of this documentation or knowledge that is created within an organization. And the benefit of it is, or the advantage to it is that you have a central hub for the document management and file sharing. You can easily save and search and retrieve emails related to projects at a later stage. You can control the document management, the document creation, as well as the approval flow within an organization. So at the end of the day, it's a very, very powerful tool that allows you, there's no longer this problem in an organization with your teams working on outdated documents or information. So with that now, I'm going to hand over to Robert, who will be taking us through the demonstration of the Deltek PIM solution. Just for those who are on today's call, the purpose of today's demo is for us to provide you with a high-level introduction in terms of the capabilities of what the solution can do. Deltek PIM is quite a broad and extensive solution, and our intention is if you are interested in learning more about what this can do, we'd be happy to set up a one-on-one meeting with you post this to unpack the PIM solution in a little bit more detail with you. So with no further ado, I will hand over to Robert. So Robert, you should be in control of the screen now.
Fantastic. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Ian, for the introduction there. Let me just double check that screen's coming through okay.
Perfect on our side, yep.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you for the introduction. Just to, I suppose, pick out a couple of themes from there. To sum this product up, I'd say it's about getting you organized. It's providing that single place that you can go to find out all the information that you know about your customers, clients, suppliers, projects, running your business. And hopefully over the next few minutes, I'll take you through some of the core features of the system and show you how we think this can save you some time and reduce the potential exposure to risk when you're delivering your projects. So we're going through some of the basic elements of the system here. So it's effectively a big old SQL database with a website on the front looking at it. So we've logged in here through a browser and you first land at this landing page here, which is just a soft start into the system, giving you some bits of news and frequently used websites that you may need to access. We'll pass through that fairly quickly and go to the personal zone here, which is the opening dashboard where you can see quick links into elements of the system that you might need to use on a daily basis. So we've got simple things like a list of projects that you're working on here, or a list of inquiries, work that you're chasing that you've not yet won. There's a library of 30 or 40 of these dashboards depending on your role in the business and your security rights. And you can choose to add the ones that are most appropriate to what you do and lay them out on the screen however you see fit, just to make your view on the world or view on your day more appropriate for you. One of the most useful features I think here is this phone book. So you can start looking up someone's details if you wanted to here in its very simplest form. If you think of this as the one place that you go to find out all the information about all of the people that you work with, then this can be quite a powerful tool just to, in its very simplest form, find a phone number, find some contact information. But if you wanted to find out a bit more about Mike here, we could click through onto his contact record and think of this as a home page for this person. So as a business, what do we know about Mike? So we know who he works for, how to get hold of him, where he used to work maybe. We track that employment history as people move around. And then you can come across to this history tab here and start to get into a little dip into the CRM world, maybe, where we can see a history of what we've done with Mike over the years. So what projects have we had on, what bids have we worked with Mike on? So we can see there's a handful of live projects and maybe some completed ones as well. So we can see what we've done with Mike over time. So maybe let's pick on one of these projects and go and have a look at how that hangs together. So when you arrive in the project at its homepage, system's broken down in a series of tabs and bands to give you the information about the project. So at the top here, we've got the basic information, the sort of dates, durations, and values that everyone records, maybe in a spreadsheet or in a database or in a document somewhere. But it's very rare that these things get pulled together. And if you put them all in a database like this, obviously you can use that for searching and filtering and reporting further down the line. But at the moment, it's just useful reference information for people. As we scroll down the page, we can build up the internal team. So who do we know who's working on this project from within our business? And then the same for the external team. So we can build up however small or large it needs to be. We can build up clients, consultants, anyone else who's involved, and what role they're carrying out on this particular project. Again, it's all the knowledge that you've got in the business somewhere, but it might be in people's heads, or it might be in Word documents, in files somewhere. So to have it in this referenceable database format, I think adds some value straight away. So let's start thinking about documents. This second tab at the top here, we can go into and have a look at all of the documents that relate to this project. Now we take a slightly different approach to storing documents. It's a database-driven approach where we think it's a step up from yellow folders that most people are used to using. So with yellow folders, you have no choice but to start at the top, navigate down through a structure that may or may not be consistent between projects and may contain subfolders that have been poorly named or moved or dragged around. And there's a lot of inherent problems with that kind of approach. So we try and bring it together in this database-driven way, where I could just come into this project here and say, well, I'm new to this project, or I'm just back from holiday or something like that. I can come in here, hit search, and see what's been happening recently. So I can see everything in date order. I can see a combination here of emails. There's some documentation. There's maybe some drawings, and further down there'll be some spreadsheets, I'm sure. So it's just giving me that quick view of everything on this project in one go. I've not got to go off to Outlook to have a look at my emails. I've not got to navigate file shares or SharePoint sites or anything else like that to see that picture. I'm seeing everything in the one view. So down the left here, we have this idea of document pools. So you can provide a bit of structure to how you're storing things. Strictly speaking, they're probably not necessary because we can store everything in this linked bucket of information, if you like. But people like this idea of categorizing the documents that they're looking for. So I could just come in here and say, find me the latest progress reports on this particular project, and that's going to give me the most recent set of information. Or if I'm not entirely sure where something's been filed, as I did at the start, I can come right to the top and search everything and see everything across the whole project. The system will help me by trying to make some suggestions. So it'll say out of all of the documents on this project, 148 of them have been published by this guy John, and I can click on there and see what John's published into the project recently. And then maybe start filtering it down up here by file type or by dates or whatever it is that I know I want to use to find something. If, however, you're not entirely sure it's been filed appropriately, or you're not aware of that information, but you know it's something to do with a certain topic, and you have this search box at the top here, so I could maybe, in this case, look for something to do with a cycle shed, hit return, and that's going to find me all of the documents that contain the word or phrase that I've asked for. So if I just widen that search a bit and remove my little filter there, and we can see here's everything on that project, 33 documents that contain the word or phrase I've looked for. A couple of these are quite obvious. But if I move across to this extracts view over here, then the system will give me some context about where it's found the word or phrase that I'm particularly looking for. So, so say some are obvious because they're in the title, others are in the body. And it's just saving you that time and effort of having to open documents up to read them to find out they're not the ones you want and move on to the next one. And if you add up all that time over a period, then you've got quite a significant amount of saving. Okay, let's go back to details view and say that maybe this document here is the one that we're interested in this time round. One of the key things to draw your attention to here is the version control. So this is offering us version 1.3 as the default because that's the most recent information the system knows about the document. If I was to click on its title, then this bottom panel pops up, which gives me the life story of this document. I can see what it's related to, who published it and when. And if I go across to the versions tab here, I can see all of the previous versions of that document. So we can see here that there have been 3 or 4 iterations to get us to 1.3. I can go back and look at these old ones here if I wanted to, but I can't pick them up in error. It's the big feature here, that you're only being presented with the most recent information. You can go back and look at the old stuff, but you have to mean to do it. You don't need to worry about dragging things into superseded folders or making sure you're looking at the right version. You can be confident that the stuff above the line is the most recent, but you've got that comfort of the audit trail if you wanted to go back and see how that document had evolved to arrive at that particular point. If we were to want to make some changes to this document, it works on a very simple check-out, check-in mechanism. So I can check that document out, make my changes to it, and then put it back in. It will automatically move along to version 1.4, and it'll move 1.3 down below the line for me without me needing to deal with that as a separate process. And whilst I've got control of that document, other people can see that I've got it. They can't make their changes to it because it's locked out to me for that version control, but they would at least know who has it. So if it was vital that they had quick access to it, they could come and find me and deal with it that way. Okay, so we've looked at some documents there in the context of a project, which is probably quite a logical way to do so. But when we clicked on Mike's record earlier on, you may have spotted, if you're eagle-eyed, there's a Documents tab at the top for his record as well. So this is going to give us the ability to cut the cake a different way. So if we know that we wrote to Mike in a certain time frame about a certain topic, but we can't remember the project it was about or anything else, then this gives us another way to possibly find it. So we could come in here and say, well, find me everything to do with Mike. And this is now giving us every document, email, and drawing that Mike's been involved in across all of our projects, across all time. So it's giving us just another way to find that document. Taking that up even further, if we come back to the main homepage of the system, we've now got an information zone here, which is going to allow us to search across the entire body of documents in the business, across all projects, all people, all time, assuming that I've got rights to do so. The security will allow us to control who's allowed to see these things clearly. So if I was maybe doing some research into environmental issues, then I can use this as a research tool and see what we know as a business about a particular topic. And then when I pick on one of these documents, maybe down here, then the summary panel is going to give us some information. It's going to tell us which project maybe that document was related to or who published it. And that might just lead me off down a path of research where I can go and find the right people to say, okay, what do we know about this topic? And maybe do a bit of learning there to save the classic all staff emails, who knows about this, which just wastes everybody's time. Okay. So back at the project, that's fine. We've looked at how you retrieve some of these documents and how you find them and some of the power in there. But how do they get there in the first place? Well, we've got a few tools to have a little look at about how some of these documents arrive in the system. The first thing we start thinking about maybe letters, correspondence, minutes, documents that you're creating. Typically, people will take those from a previous project or from the last time they used it, save as, copy and paste, maybe persist errors or have not the current branding and sending out old copies of things and just doesn't look great. So we think a bit of a carrot and stick approach is appropriate here, where we try and make it a bit easier for users to do that, but also guide them down the path that you want to follow your own procedures. So if I was to say on this project, I wanted to, maybe I've met Mike and I wanted to create the meeting minutes that are the follow-up from that meeting. And I click next to Mike's name here. That's going to give me a list of all of our standard company templates so that you can break this down however you see fit. So I could come into the project section maybe and say, pick on the project minutes. As we move through this process now, the system is making lots of decisions for us. So it knows that the document I'm going to create should go in the project meeting minutes area. So it's enforcing that filing location so that you're sticking to your own QA processes. But as we've seen here, I could equally put that into a different pool as well. So if I wanted to apply that to a different location in the system, then I can do so. The system's only going to create one document. It's just going to just reference it in those multiple places. It also knows the projects I'm on. It knows who I've clicked next to and who they work for. So that's already applying me 3 tags on this document, and we'll see the benefit of that later. So I can now just carry on through this process. So the document I'm going to create needs a title, so we just put a title in there. And then optionally, if you wanted to go a stage further, you can have these unique reference codes that get stamped into the documents as well. And they help to enforce the file naming conventions if you have those in play. Optional step, that's a step too far for many, so that's just an option. When we hit finish now, that's going to go away and grab that template document for us and merge in any data that it needs from the database to produce the output document. So in this case, we can see that's pulled through the project details at the top, the date, the file stamp reference, and then who was attending the meeting. Any other fields of data that you've got in the system can come through onto here as well. So if you've got other templates, I'm sure you can start imagining how they might operate with that, where you've got some of those project dates and values and durations that could come into proposal templates or anything else that you wanted to add into here. So I've now just got a Word document in the normal way. I can just carry on and fill that document out and close and save it. I don't need to worry about where it is because the system's managing it for me. So that document's going to be filed in the right place, tagged up against all the right people for anyone to be able to find and use a little later on. Okay, so that's a brief look at how some of the documentation gets in there. Let's maybe move on now and think about how the emails interact with the system. Outlook remains. We don't try and change that. Everyone seems to be comfortable with the way Outlook operates, so that continues, and that's still your delivery mechanism of choice. But you'll see up in the right-hand corner here at the top, there's an add-in that's going to allow us to interact with the system. So taking a simple example here, maybe I've received an incoming email from Mike, and I'm this fictitious John character now, so I can sort of deal with that, do what I need to do with it, and I want to just put a copy of that email in the system for record purposes. So all I need to do is come up here and say publish that to Deltek PIM, pick the location I want to place it, and this is the places that I've filed to most recently. So as you start to move on to different projects, or you're working on inquiries, or you're filing into different parts of the system, this list here will grow. So I can just say, yeah, it's about the Cambridge project. I can double click that, and that's me done. That's that email filed away in the system. I need to do no more with it. I could have had that delete itself automatically. That's a user setting, but I've left it here on purpose to show you this little tick box, which indicates that that's already filed in the system. So if I received an email that one of my colleagues has published at the point of creation, when I receive it with the tick box on, I can just deal with it and delete it, safe in the knowledge that it's already in our system. And if I did in fact try to publish it twice, it wouldn't let me. It will tell me that that document is already in the system, so you can't have two copies. So that's saving that situation where if you've ever tried managing email through network folders, you end up with 5 or 6 copies of the same email because everybody files it in there, and the system allows that, but this one will prevent you from doing so. If I'm replying to this email or creating a new email, then that box comes up again to say, okay, you're writing a new piece of email. Where are you going to put it? So I can say it's about this Cambridge project again, maybe. Double click that. Optionally, the system can then look at that project and say, okay, here's all the people on that project. Who are you sending it to? It's likely that they're on the project, so you can go through and make selection. If they're not on the project, you can look them up from this search box at the top. When we then hit continue, that's going to give us an email pulling through the information of the people that we've picked and the project name and number as a start point. We're now in familiar Outlook world, so you can just carry on and write your email as you want to, and if you want to add somebody else in to the list here, you can just add them on. You're just in traditional Outlook world. It's all familiar to people. One thing that is a little different here, whilst you can still attach files by browsing as you normally would, there's also the ability to add attachments or links potentially if you're sending these emails internally, where we can say, okay, I want to go and add a document that's already in the system. So let's go and see what we've got against this particular project. So it'll load up what it knows about the project. There's maybe this letter I want here and some access details. So I want to go and get a copy of those documents and add them into my email. This screen here is just letting us choose a rendition because there is potential for us to be holding more than one file format for these documents. So you might have, in the case of a drawing, a DWG and a PDF. So you're able to make a selection about what file formats you want to issue here. And that's going to then go and get copies or links of those documents, add them to my email, and it's going to make an entry in the system to say that I emailed these documents to these people at this date and time. So the audit trail of whatever you've done with those documents is always maintained. Okay, just to round this one off, a couple more things here. Whilst we're thinking of attachments, if you have incoming attachments like we have here, so you've got an email that's come in with a handful of drawings on it maybe, when you publish those into the system, as well as picking the project that you want to file them to, you may notice down the bottom here is now the option to divert the attachments and put them somewhere else. So we might want to say these are specification records possibly. There's then an attachment tab at the top where we can divert individual attachments. So maybe the first few, that's correct, but this last one should go somewhere else. So rather than having to save the attachments off the email and navigate somewhere into the system and browse to work out where to put them, you can do all that in the same screen. You can work out where these things ought to go as part of that one process. Hit publish, it's going to put the email in, move the attachments to their rightful location and let you go about your business and carry on with the next email. Final thing to mention here is searching for email. You could, of course, go into the main system as we did earlier, but if you like, most people under your inbox, you'll have a whole nest of subfolders that relate to the projects that you're currently working on. So we're advocating getting rid of those because we provide you with the list of all your linked projects down here automatically. So we could scroll down to this Cambridge project, click on that one, and that's going to show us a list of all of the emails that have been stored against that particular project. And as a step up from what you might have under your inbox, this is now not just your emails, this is everyone's emails. So you're going to see the complete email story of this particular project, and you've got all the searching and filtering options that we skimmed across earlier on. Also, if that changes your thought process and you now want to start including other things other than emails, you can of course switch that back to its traditional view, where it will start bringing in documents and spreadsheets and drawings and everything else as well. So you're still in Outlook, as I'm sure you can tell, but you're using the PIM interface to get the power of that indexing and searching. Okay, brief pause for breath there. We've covered quite a lot in a fairly short space of time, and that's just giving you an overview, hopefully, of some of the routes that documents and emails take to get into the system, and how easy it is and how fast it is to get those documents back out again when you need them later. I'm going to switch to PowerPoint for a moment now, just to talk a little bit about how we handle drawings through the system. This can be an entire topic in its own right. So rather than get lost in detail there, I wanted to just overview that and talk about some of the additional features that we have to manage drawings in the system. So these are just some of the classic problems that we see people having with drawings. Probably the top one being the key one. If you're working off of out-of-date information, that's never going to end well. So we've got some tools in there that you've seen with the version control that help with that process. We're going to have some issue information, so you can see what information has been issued to who and when. You don't need to worry about superseded folders. We've got some tools in here that allow you to handle sending large files to people to get around the problem of email file sizes not getting through to your recipients. Okay, so you'll probably recognize this kind of view. So we've moved across the top here from we looked at general and documents earlier. I've now jumped across to this drawings tab here, DLM. Where we can start to break our drawings down by sets. So rather than be given just a flat list as we did before, we can now break it down by something more relevant to each project. So you can have definable different sets for each project, whether that's the level or the element or the package or the trade, anything you like. That can be completely bespoke project by project, just as a way of grouping that. So if you have got hundreds of drawings, you don't just get given a flat list. Here we can still see the version control retains its features as we saw before, so you're only seeing the most recent information, and over here we can see the different renditions that I mentioned as well. So we're holding different file formats of the same thing, but we don't want to blow that up by having 3 rows to illustrate that. It's 1 row for here's the drawing, and here's all the different versions that we know about it. Okay, we have some naming convention tools, so we can create extra placeholders down here and force your users to follow your own rules, really, if you have these naming conventions. So you can have a number of naming conventions set up in here, and depending on which one you choose, you'll get a series of questions, all of which are driving you towards arriving at a drawing number. So it can be a nice simple one like this, or it can be a much more complicated one that follows industry standards. So you answer 5, 6, 7 questions that builds up the elements of this file name to give you the placeholder. There's the ability to add these in bulk or upload them from a CSV file maybe. So if you've already been presented with this by your client as saying here's the drawings you need to produce, you can upload those straight off of a spreadsheet. You can also have deadlines of when they need to be due. Further across the screen, you can assign them to people, so people can have a view of their future workload and see which drawings need to be created and when by. So that's going to create us these placeholders down the side here, which are our homes for all of our drawings. You then need to think about how you're going to actually get the physical files into the system. So there's an assign renditions feature here where you can drag and drop files in that you've maybe received. And then choose to assign those physical files onto these placeholders. So this is really all about keeping the versions up to date for stuff that you're not necessarily authoring yourselves. So what this is doing here is quite busy screen at first glance, but it's quite simple what it's trying to do. It's trying to match up the incoming information. So we can see here it's saying that, yeah, okay, here's the incoming file. I think I've got a match. You're holding revision A, so I'm going to suggest that we're going to move this onto revision B. But it doesn't want to do that automatically in case you've received things out of sequence. So it's giving you that chance to come in here and sanity check this and maybe change the revision to get it in the right order. Down here, you can also see it's recognized by the file name that these are 3 versions of the same drawing. So it's going to just try and keep those renditions in order for us as well. So really, all this screen is doing the hard work. It's just giving you a view before it says, okay, I'm going to apply all this stuff. Are you sure I've got it right? It's just giving you that chance in case you receive things that have been poorly titled or sent out of sequence. Okay, an optional step in a process, which I'm not going to go through in huge detail today, but we can always look at another time if we need to, is the ability to send these things for approval or for comment. So we've got a workflow in here where you can send a set of drawings around for a set of people to make comments on it or maybe affect the approval status. And that can be a mixture of internal and external users, depending on the project scenario. When you hit that, the recipients will have the option to mark the drawings up, and if any of them do so using an online markup tool, then it will give you an indicator here that there is some markup, so people have made comments on these drawings. And you also get the complete history down the bottom here. Again, I won't go through that today, but I'm sure you can imagine that's going to give you the audit trail to say who's commented on these things and when, and potentially who's holding you up. So who has not commented perhaps is often more important than who has. So that can get you to a point where you've created a placeholder, you've received the information, or you've created the information, you've put that in there, and you've got that approved and commented on. So the next part of the process may be then to formally issue that out to people. So we've got the option to do that here. So you can make some selections of drawings that you want to issue and send them around to people. The system can suggest to you, based on who had the previous revisions, we ought to be sending it to the same set of people maybe, so that we don't leave anybody out. Or you can have defined issue groups. If you find yourself always issuing certain information to the same groups of people, you can have their defaults set up in here. What you can do then is choose how you're going to send it. So by email maybe, or you can record a hard copy, or as I alluded to right at the start, we've got the ability to send download links to people in a sort of Dropbox style. So rather than sending them 50 megs of full attachments, you can send a nice slim link that's going to get through their email system, and it's going to allow them to come and download their content from your system without that large file causing a problem. So as we move through the process here, you can then get a quick summary of what you've just said you're going to do, because there's a few steps involved there. So you're going to issue this drawing to these people in these formats, and then switching hats a little bit. I'm now the person receiving this, could be an external person. I'd get an email through with a link on it. That will take me through to a nice chunky simple landing page. No logging on, no passwords for them to remember, or more importantly for them to forget. So you can just send that out to people by their email address, and they get a unique personal link that takes them straight to this landing page and nowhere else. If they tried to mess around up here, they'd get thrown out straight away. They can then download these files one at a time, or they can do the whole lot, and that's just in their browser, any browser they choose, and it'll download them a zip file containing all of their content, and they're away. And the payback for you, as I'm sure you can imagine, is when you then find that drawing later on, not only do you have a record of that being formally issued, but on the read by tab, you'd have an entry in here to say that that person has bothered to download their content. So you get away from that situation saying, "Well, I didn't receive it." Well, the system says otherwise. Someone with your link has followed that and downloaded the content. That will also then create you an issue register, something like this. Clearly, we can format this to be a little prettier, but you probably recognise the format here, where you've got the issues across the top, the drawings down the side, and the revisions in the boxes, and then further down the page will be the recipient's information. That's really now an automated byproduct of using the system, so you don't need to go off to Excel to update a register or go and carry out another process to get this dealt with. That's just an automated report that comes out of the system. And we can affect the format of that and have different registers for different projects depending on how you need to show that, whether it's incoming or outgoing. So yeah, another little pause there. Been through a lot quickly as usual. So we've been through the whole drawing management process there, from creation of a home for a drawing, through approvals, through revision control, through formal issues, and how you can interact with your project teams to disseminate that information and whilst maintaining your own internal audit control. Okay. Just as this screen shows here, I just wanted to recap what we've been through. So we've been through some basic database stuff where we've shown that the system is your kind of one place, if you like, for holding contacts and organizations and opportunities and projects that you're working on, and how those things are linked together. We've then looked at this core offering here, how emails, documents and drawings are interacting with that, and how you're allowed to put those in there and search for them later, and how that can save you time and reduce the risk associated with managing those processes. What we've also got over on the right here are a series of additional modules that can be brought into scope depending on the use and what you want to do with the system. Again, for today, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I wanted to maybe just pick out one of them. So let's have a quick look at the mobile pack. We've got a mobile application that's going to allow you to carry on interacting with the system even if you're offline. So it's not a fully featured mobile enabled version of the whole system. It's really designed for interacting with those workflows that you might have when you're out on site doing an inspection or an audit, or taking progress photos, those things that are often problematic when you're out in remote locations. So taking something like a site inspection, traditionally you have to go out with a clipboard, fill in some information, maybe take some photos and deal with storing those, come back to the office, collate that into a report. It's just fiddly. Taking the photos off the camera, they're all called DSC 7543 or something irrelevant like that. And once you've finally collated that lot, you've then got to store it, deal with that for a number of years, and potentially ultimately get rid of it. So there's quite a lot of steps, lots of people, lots of effort involved in something that's really quite a simple process. So we say, why not make that easier? Why not have that filled out on a phone or a tablet, have that put into your PIM system automatically without you having to do any more work, as whatever format it needs to be in, and then potentially that can notify who it needs to notify, and then that's your living archive. That's you done. You can move on to the next task. You haven't got those admin processes that no one really enjoys doing. So just a couple of points. Yeah. iOS and Android, that's fine. Works on any of those devices, and also any of the forms that you fill out through these devices here, you can also do in the browser. So if you're in the full system, you can still carry on filling out the same database if you don't want to use the tablet devices. So what does it look like? Well, it's a chunkier interface, clearly, as it has to be for these kind of systems. So, but as before, it's working off the same source data. So if I wanted to have a look at the list of projects I'm involved in, we saw this in the My Projects screen back at the main system earlier. I've got the same thing on my device now. So I could go into one of these projects, have a look at the basic information, maybe scroll down and have a look at the people that are involved. So all of their contact information is going to be synchronized here. So I've got copies of that when I'm offline as well. And then there's various things I need to do down here. So there's snags or observations that are outstanding for me to act upon. So it's giving me a list of things that I might need to deal with. Again, I won't go through all of this, but just to pick on a couple of features, there's the actions button here where we're allowed to start doing things. So we can start to do things like taking photos or logging observations. So if we just have a look at one of those, maybe. You then get to fill in a really simple form. So you can add some text in here. You can have custom drop downs. So what type of observation have you noticed? What's the detail of it? You can add some photographs in here. You can allocate it to someone, so you can pass it to one of your colleagues if they're responsible for rectifying this or doing something about this. You can then maybe pick a drawing that's been synchronized with the device and drop a pin on it. So you can say where you were on the site when you noticed this particular thing. And then as the screen allows, as you go through and fill in all the mandatory fields, you then just hit the submit button and you're done. And then when the device has a connection, if it's got a connection, it will send it now. Now, if it hasn't, it will store it till it has a connection later. And then it's going to put that information back into the main database and notify anyone that needs notifying about that piece of work. Okay, what we also have to build on from that is a custom form builder, because not everyone's going to have the same processes. So for things like these are the kind of things that we've seen some of our customers take on with this, where they're doing site visits, diaries, audits, inspections, those kind of things that you're out there with pieces of paper dealing with can all be converted into these forms, and you can do that yourselves without needing to come back to us all the time to have those designed. So taking a really simple example like a daily diary, everyone has one, but they're all slightly different. So this is just going to allow you to tweak that to suit. You can start to build in the fields that you want to record. Are they mandatory or not? How do you want that to be structured? And then once you've filled that form in and you saved it, then that converts itself to looking a bit like that on the tablet device. So there's those same fields that we saw just a moment ago. You can have yes, no's, multiple choice buttons, different colorings going on the screen, just to mirror the questions that you want to answer. And then once you submit that, that's going to find itself back in the system. You recognize this screen from earlier, I'm sure. So that's going to go into an appropriate place in the system, titled appropriately again, so you can control how these documents get named, and the document's going to follow a certain format. Any photos that you take get resized and put in the appropriate location. You can catch signatures. It's just trying to save you have to manipulate that stuff, which is just such a time-intensive, wasteful effort. So just by filling it out on the tablet, hit the button, then you've got that process dealt with and it's in the system and away. Okay, that's probably enough of me rabbiting on. We've gone through a fair amount of information in a fairly short space of time, but it was quite important. I wanted to just give you an overall feel for the system there of some of the main reasons for using it and how it can, as we say, save you time, improve your processes, and hopefully reduce some of the risks that you're exposed to. So I think I'll probably hand back over to Ian and Yvonne, and we've got a bit of time for questions.
Thank you so much, Robert. I know it's no easy task to kind of jam such a robust product into a 45, 50 minute webinar. So thank you, and I think you did a great job. Just in the interest of time, I would like to just cover a couple of questions. Unfortunately, we won't be able to get to everyone's questions today, but please do email us on info@silversoft.co.za, visit our website. You can contact myself or Ian directly too on the email addresses that you would have seen earlier in the presentation. Okay, Ian, I'm going to have you go over some questions that have come through in the chat panel.
Perfect. So one of the questions that's come in, Rob, maybe you get in a better position to advise on this given your experience. How long does it take for the average implementation, the effort required, and what is the input required from a client in order to make it a successful project?
Okay, yeah, good question. I suppose the obvious answer is there's no such thing as a typical implementation. They're all different, and our approach would allow for that. But if we had to pick a start point, a kind of rule of thumb, you'd maybe say 3-4 months, up to 6 months, that kind of time, and that's really just to reflect that this is not something you can kind of stop the business for and just deal with. You need to carry on with your day jobs. You need to carry on churning the business. But so it's really a question of how much time and effort you can afford to spare to put into it. Some people can devote someone to it, so we can go a bit quicker. Others have to fit it in, so it takes a little longer. But we do break it down. It's quite a long process, as you can imagine, but we break it down into manageable chunks. So we'll talk to you about email management one time, then document management the next, and database structure, and break that up into chunks. We kind of recommend a steering group approach, so that you have a team of people that you can reach everyone in the business, so that you can get everyone's feedback into the way it's going to work. But generally, it's helpful if we can have some single person heading it up. That's our sort of point of contact. That's going to make the decisions and act as the conduit, if you like, with the rest of the business.
Perfect, great. Thanks for that, Rob. The second one that's come in here, is this solution cloud-based, or is there an on-premise option available? So I can take that one. So Deltek's got an offering for both on-premise, if you've already got an existing infrastructure and investment that you're wanting to make use of. However, in the last year, Deltek has migrated this solution to become a full cloud-based solution operating out of AWS. And one of the benefits there in the licensing price for the cloud option is the applicable storage for documents and all the information that's stored as part of the annual licensing price, and there's no additional charge for as the storage increases. Deltek don't charge a premium on that, so it's quite useful for clients in this day and age that don't want to make any additional infrastructure investments. They now can invest in the cloud. Next question that's come through here is around file types, the sizes, and what the sizes that the system will support, and are there any restrictions? So Rob, I'm going to ask if you can take that one.
Yep, certainly. There's not a restriction on the file types the system will handle. It doesn't mind. It's just storage and database entries. But you can limit that. So if you wanted to change the way that certain files behave, you can do so. And some people will put restrictions on file sizes. So if someone is trying to upload a 2 GB video for some reason, you can either have it as a warning, so it says this might take a while, it's got a lot of data to move, or you can limit it completely, so it says you can't do this, this file's just too large, go and speak to your sysadmin and work out a better way to handle this file. And those thresholds are configurable, so you can decide how much information you do or don't want people to put into the system. Expanding that a little bit, when we're talking about drawings, you can limit, because they're a bit more of a deliverable, they're slightly more formalized, you can limit the file types in there. So you can say that we're only allowed to deal with certain file types when we're talking about deliverables. But I suppose to answer the root of the question, no limit. You can store any files you like in there.
Awesome, perfect. Thank you for that. Then, looking at the time now, I think we've got time for one more question. Is around the security model and how can areas be locked down or opened up within PIM?
Yep. Okay. Do you want me to take that one? Shall I do that one? Probably.
Yeah, sorry. You can take that one. Yeah.
So rather like anything else, it's users and groups. So you create groups of users and you decide what those groups are allowed to do. And then when you add new users to the system, you can just tick them into one or more roles, which is going to let them inherit some rights. So some key examples there are the document pools that we looked at when we were looking at how the documents are stored. Those folders down the left, you can decide who's allowed to see those, who's allowed to publish to them. And we talked about the different tab sets across the top. So when we went to the DLM one to manage drawings, if users don't need to or you don't want them to manage drawings, you can just remove that tab. So you can just take out, it's quite a granular system, so you can remove or allow or deny access to certain parts of the system depending on how it sees fit. The follow-on question that often comes up with that, it may or may not be there, is does it interact with Active Directory? It does to a degree, in that if you are already authenticated on the system, it will pass you straight through. You can tie those two things together. But because the security roles inside PIM are more granular, we don't tie those up with your user roles in AD. So you do need to create separate ones, but there is that nice link so that authenticated users don't need to have another password to remember. They can just pass straight into the system.
Perfect. Well, I think that we reached the top of the hour now. So, Robert, thank you very much for your time today and input. Again, it's always a pleasure having you involved with these. And to those on today's webinar, I hope it provides you with some insight into the capabilities. And we look forward to hearing from you. And on that note, I'm going to say thank you to everyone for your attendance and have a great day further.